Hello everyone, I welcome you to the Mindful Magazine channel. Today I have with me John Allcock. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to do this interview.
No worries, thank you very much.
I will do a small introduction. I hope I'm saying it all correctly. John has been practicing mindfulness for over 15 years. And he is the co-founder and director of the C Preparatory School. And this is a school that is integrating mindfulness in its curriculum, which is fantastic. But we're here to talk about the book, 40 Things I Wish I Would Have Told My Kids. So tell me, John, could you tell me a little bit more about yourself and how your practice in mindfulness lead into this book, into writing this inspirational book?
Okay, very good. So I, in 2009, I was undergoing some challenging times. I was going through a divorce and other things. And so I turned to mindfulness. I read many books. I attended lectures. I went to retreats, seminars, silent retreats, and it was very helpful to me. And so I tried to find a book to give my kids, and I couldn't find one that I thought explained it clearly and succinctly. So on Father's Day of 2009, in a hotel room in London, I decided I'd send them emails. And over the course of a couple of years, I sent them literally, much to their chagrin, I'll add, dozens and dozens and dozens of emails. And over time, people started saying, you should turn this into a book. And so I did. I condensed what ended up being maybe 150 or so emails into the 40 short chapters that forms the book. So that's the short story of how it came about.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. So it's actually, it came from a surprise, or the emails, like it's a hobby, and then it turns right into a book after that.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
And what is the audience of your book? Is it for kids itself, or is it for parents, or?
So originally, I thought it would be for, at the time my kids were in their teens. And so originally I thought it would be for that. It turns out parents are actually a very large audience. And then it turns out, most recently with the publication of the book, that grandparents are a very large audience. I've talked to a couple of them that tell me they bought the book for their grandkids, and also that they keep the book lying around on their coffee table, so that when they get angry, they know there's a chapter on that. When they get mad, they know there's a chapter on that. When they, so it's funny.
Wow, and it's interesting because you would say that maybe because mindfulness is in the Western world something that has been coming up recently. So it's so interesting to hear that the older generations are picking it up and are using it for their own grandchildren.
Yeah, my attempt was to describe it in a way that a purely Western audience with no background, or frankly no interest in the subject, would find the book interesting. I mean, really, it isn't until about chapter 5, 6, 7, or 8 that the book starts identifying what it's about by using terms that would be common in mindfulness circles. Before that, quite intentionally, the book uses common sense terms that are as familiar to our grandparents as they are to us here in the West.
Oh, wow. And are there some, if you could describe shortly, some tips for parents, for example, on how to raise their children in a mindful way? Could you describe something shortly?
Well, the overarching point and it starts with the first chapter and was in the first email, is don't be ruled by the tyranny of events. So in other words, the idea is don't let your happiness be dictated by the events that happen to you.
Yes.
Realize that your experience of life is created by the events and by your response to the events. And you always have control over the response to the events. And your happiness is always dictated by the combination of the two, more than half of which is within your control.
Yes. And I read as well that you said living happily takes practice in a way.
Yeah,
How
that's right.
do you commit this practice in your daily lives, for example?
Yeah, well, both myself and the students at Sea Change engage in a mindful meditation effort. I do it with them 3 days a week, typically, where we spend 20 minutes or so basically practicing exercising mindfulness, exercising paying attention to your breath, and examining but not getting captured by your emotions, your thoughts, the external sounds that occur outside of your own internal system, and realizing that we choose to get engaged in all those things. It's not automatic.
It's so interesting. I really believe that there should be more school systems that should apply this every week, basically, because what are the results that you see integrating mindfulness in the school?
Well, what we see is increased ability to pay attention, increased focus, increased compassion, both for the students to each other and also self-compassion. And by the way, that's what larger studies have shown with the introduction of far less of a mindfulness curriculum than what we have at Sea Change.
Oh, wow. So it does really work and it does show results.
Yes, that's what we found. And that's what the studies show.
Amazing. And I saw that in the book it said failure leads to new things. How do you could you explain how do you see that? So you fail, and what is the new thing that's coming out of that?
Well, nothing of significance has been achieved by anybody without failing. I mean, it's Thomas Edison said it best, maybe, when he said, after he spent 3 years trying to make a light bulb and had 1,000 experiments, and he said, I never had a single failure. I now know 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, right? And so after all of those opportunities where he didn't succeed, they ended up being building blocks for what ultimately he did succeed in. And so anything that we would commonly refer to in our culture as failure merely is an effort to achieve something where you didn't do it in that particular instance. But as long as you learned something from it, it wasn't a failure at all from the perspective of learning. So that's kind of what that chapter is all about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's actually true. Because if we would reach everything in one go, that would mean that we learn nothing.
Right. And it also probably means that you're not picking goals that are really meaningful, right? I mean, if our goal in life was to watch TV and watch video games, we could achieve that pretty easily. We wouldn't fail at that goal. But I don't think any of us would say that that's a worthy goal. So any goal that we pick that is of meaning that is of importance to us implies some challenge. And if challenge is applied, failure could occur. But there's nothing wrong with any of that.
And do you think that mindfulness will help you overcome your obstacles in your failures more easily?
Yeah, because it puts them in proper context and allows you to approach the next challenge with the proper attitude, and learn from those challenges that you didn't overcome, and at least the first, as you say, go.
Yeah, that's very true. And what do your children think about your book?
Oh, they're very excited about it. We had a little book launch party, and they're all very, very excited about it. They've given it to many of their friends and spread it around. They're pretty devoted to the concepts that are in there. Having, what I tell people is there actually was a lecture series that went along with the book that they all had to suffer as well. So.
There were almost like your editorials. They were the editors, because they were checking the book probably.
Yeah, the emails, yeah.
Okay, and is it because probably this the title of the book said 40 things I wish I would have told my children? If you had the knowledge that you have today and you could start it all over again, would you change something in raising your kids?
Oh yeah, for sure, because I didn't know any of this stuff when I was raising them when they were young. I learned it all, starting when the youngest of them was in their mid to late teens. So, and that's really the reason I wrote the book, is these are things I would have told all of them and practiced myself, when they were young. But, I was a product of Western culture. My parents didn't know any of these things. My teachers didn't know any of these things. I went to some of the better schools in the country, Boston College, Harvard Law School. None of this was taught there, because mindfulness wasn't really prevalent in the West until very, very recently. I mean, the 70s at the very earliest, really, and not even then. So yeah, no, I would have incorporated a lot more of it into my early parenting.
Oh yeah, and I read also a thing about fears. You said something about the fears are imaginary.
Yeah.
And why do you think that people have so much fears with them? Why do you think so?
Yeah, that's actually a big part of the book. You see it in a lot of different areas in there. And so our systems, our brains, they're no different than the cave people. And when we were cave people, fear was a really good thing. There were saber-toothed tigers to contend with. There were warring tribes to contend with. There were all kinds of dangers. And so having a system that was biased towards producing adrenaline, towards producing cortisol, towards depriving the whole world of focus except for that saber-toothed tiger or that warring tribe, that was a really, really good thing because it preserved you. Self-preservation. When the adrenaline pumps, the cortisol pumps, you're energized, and it's useful when there are dangers that are present. Now, the problem is we still have that same system. We still have adrenaline producing, cortisol producing, attention focused when anxiety hits. But now there's no saber-toothed tigers. There's a credit card bill, or there's a, upcoming meeting with your boss, or a presentation you need to make. And we treat those just like, or our fear of them, just like saber-toothed tigers. The adrenaline comes up, the cortisol comes up, our worry comes up, but there's no real thing to attack. There's no real thing to beat. It's all in our minds. And so our system gets so anxiety ridden that it really hurts our physical condition and our ability to really carry on in a normal society. So what mindfulness does is it allows you to feel the fear and realize that there's no saber-toothed tiger. We can let go of the fear. We don't need to let it control us and let it dominate us. And so that credit card bill that ordinarily turns into a 2-hour worry session where you're obsessing over it, can hopefully turn into a 2-minute worry session, and you let it go and you have to deal with it, but you don't have to have it dominate your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's actually, we're acting like we're in life threat all the time.
And it's all our imagination.
Yes.
It's all our imagination. It's our imagination. And that's why part of the subtitle of the book is the use and misuse of your imagination. 90% of our worries,
yes,
and a large number of our fears are a misuse of our imagination.
And do you think it is possible to eliminate most of the fears, or even all of them?
Well, you don't want to eliminate them because some are actually quite useful, right? But what you want to do is give them their appropriate due, is to recognize them. So, for example, if you have an upcoming test, having some level of fear about that is probably okay, because it's going to motivate you to study more. Any more than a slight amount is probably not very useful. So having some mindfulness allows you to evaluate the emotion and adapt to having an appropriate response, as opposed to one that's out of control, which is normally the way things work nowadays.
Yeah. And do you think fear also has to do maybe something with expectations? That people always fear that they cannot reach what they want to reach, the goals they have in mind, and then they fear.
Yeah. Another chapter talks about goals and how we set for ourselves unrealistic goals, which kind of is okay, actually. But then we beat ourselves with a stick when we don't reach the unrealistic goals that we make. And that's where the problem lies. Having lofty goals is not the problem. The problem is beating ourselves up when we don't achieve them.
Yeah. So basically, we're not happy in the process because we don't enjoy it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, wow. And what is the message that you would like to give the audience with this book?
So I think the message is basically mindfulness, which really means paying attention to your present moment experience, internal and external, without judgment and without being captured by that experience. That type of activity or behavior is something that's very worthwhile. It'll lead to much greater happiness and success in our lives. And so it's worthy of our study and practice. That's the basic message.
And can you practice mindfulness everywhere? is it possible to do it anywhere?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All you need is your awareness, which, by the way, you have all the time. Try not to be aware sometimes. It's impossible. You have your awareness all the time. And another thing that you have all the time that is an extremely useful tool to practice mindfulness is your breath. At least as long as you're living, you've got your breath. And the two of those together are a perfect combination for practicing moving your attention or your awareness from whatever internal or external event happens to be dominating yourself at the moment to one that isn't, which is your breath. So if you're very fearful or if you're very angry, you can notice that. And then you can start paying attention to your breath. And if you do that, the fear will subside. The anger will subside. It's an automatic response of our system to paying attention to something other than that which is causing the anger or causing the anxiety.
Ah, yeah. So actually everyone should just take a few minutes or a few seconds to breathe, especially when you're angry or when you want to express something. It's best to just sit still, breathe, and then rethink if you want to say the same things, for example, as what you would have done before.
Yeah, the way I think about it is it's the opportunity to create a space. And within that space, we have choice. And within that choice lies our freedom.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. And do you think that if every single school would have mindfulness classes, that a lot of things could be solved in the world?
Yeah, I mean, all of the studies have shown that the relationships between people improve, people's choices as to their behaviors improve, their ability to self-regulate their emotions improves, attention and focus improves. If all that's improved, it would be a much better place.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And would it be, are you thinking even about expanding your program, your mindfulness program in other schools?
Well, right now we've got a curriculum developed that we're using for our own purposes. And one of my current projects is to turn it into a curriculum that would be easily transferable to any other school. And essentially, it would be a series of guided meditations and a talk, one talk per week. So 3 or 4 guided meditations and 1 talk per week on many of the subjects that are covered in the book.
Oh, I think that would solve a lot. And you seem to have already the key to teach it in schools. So that would be fantastic if it even could expand, and maybe it could reach the younger audience, because basically the younger audience is our future.
Yep.
And
yep, it's amazing how even 4th graders can take to these things. Sometimes much easier than adults.
yeah. I feel sometimes I meet younger kids, and they're so wise and they're so mindful, and I'm so surprised. Because when we were younger, we weren't thinking about mindfulness, or no. It was just not there, and even the teachers, and no one was really aware of that, or how the brain works and how people respond to certain situations. It was just behave, that's it.
Yeah, certainly not in the West, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this interview. And one last thing, could you, as a message to everyone who's watching, could you give me one sentence that would inspire people to do mindfulness?
Sure. Mindfulness provides you the opportunity to choose your intention in each moment, and in that choice lies your freedom.
That's wonderful. Really, really amazing. And thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you very much. This has been fun.
Appreciate
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I think you clarified a lot. And for the people who would like to buy his book, I will place a link in the comment section. And if you have any questions, don't doubt to contact me. And thank you, John.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good luck, because your book is wonderful. And I hope you could spread the mindfulness through schools and your book and all your inspirations.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.